Hit with yet another round of really bad press, these headlines that Meghan Markle has been dealt a major blow as official ratings show her Netflix cooking show flopped, and similar headlines have flooded the news, totally dominating Meghan and Harry news lately. And it's just not a good look. So Netflix does every 6 months or so releases their ratings of what people have been watching, basically. And Meghan Markle's Netflix cooking series, which is a generous way to put it, it wasn't really very much cooking, which might be part of the problem, has received a major blow after new figures showed it failed to climb onto the streaming giant's top 300 programs globally. She released With Love, Meghan back in March, with the series receiving mostly scathing reviews by critics. If you missed our breakdown of the series, it's here. I will link it for you at the top of the page, and I'll try to remember to link it for you at the end of the video as well. But it's on the With Love, Meghan playlist on my channel, and we go through episode by episode. So we took a really objective view of the show in terms of homemaking, lifestyle, and cooking type of content of, is this something that would teach somebody something or deliver any sort of value? Are these good ideas or good recipes? And because that is the type of content that I sometimes watch. I love cooking shows. I love Great British Baking Show. I love the Spring and Holiday Baking Championships. I also watch, Ina Garten and other cooking shows sometimes. I like that type of content sometimes. I don't always have very much time, but I used to watch it more when I had more time. But anyway, the point is that I could, in theory, have fallen into the target audience, because that is the type of content that sometimes I will watch to learn a new recipe or a new technique, or get inspired and motivated to cook something that's a little bit more challenging to cook, get in the mood to cook something that's a little more time consuming or challenging. And so that was kind of the angle that we looked at the show from primarily. And then, of course, there was some inconsistencies that Meghan said, some lies that she told here and there, or just some really awkward moments that, of course, we had to discuss. But for the most part, I tried to look at it from that lens because I thought it would be the most objective way to look at the show. So if you haven't watched it, or if you're curious about it, then go take a look at that playlist and you can get a recap and decide for yourself if it deserved more views or not, if it was judged too harshly or not. During its first week, the show broke into Netflix's global top 10 shows list with about 2.6 million views, but it appears to have failed to keep momentum, as it only gathered just about another half of its views, 2.7 million, in the months after, having a total of 5.3 million views and ranking 383rd. It's not like it was a close call where she was at 301, 310, no, 383. Meanwhile, Prince Harry's polo documentary, released last December, ranked 3,436th, with a measly 500,000 views. Oh, only 500,000 views of that thing? I mean, I'm not surprised. It seemed like a total garbage show, and their attempts at marketing it were just kind of gross. But it performed embarrassingly poorly. For comparison, the most watched show globally on Netflix was Adolescence, with 145 million views, while Squid Game's seasons 2 and 3 gathered 117 million views and 72 million views respectively, completing the top 3. At the time of its release, With Love, Meghan was panned by critics, with The Guardian describing it as a gormless lifestyle filler and so pointless it might be the Sussexes' last TV show, while The Telegraph branded it insane and an exercise in narcissism. I would agree with all of those assessments. But Meghan told her fans her new project feels like a new chapter that I'm so excited that I get to share, and I've been able to learn from all of you. She didn't learn from anybody. That was part of the problem. But it's kind of embarrassing now seeing these numbers, because Netflix just does this all the time. Everybody knows it's not something that you can fudge the numbers on. It's just something they release every 6 months, I think it is. And so for her and Harry, the things that they've released in the last 6-7 months to be that bad, and for Meghan, all of this hyping up that she's done of her show, the Time 100 Summit, the podcast episodes, she was talking about it a lot, and her podcast appearances on the Jamie Kern Lima and Emma Greed's podcast, Aspire. All of these platforms she used to talk really big game about With Love Meghan and tied it directly to As Ever. And to see the numbers just kind of makes the whole thing feel embarrassing. But also is predictable because we knew that it wasn't going to do well for various obvious reasons, like the fact that she's not very likable, the fact that she lacks charisma and doesn't have experience in this type of content. She's not very knowledgeable about it, but also watching it. That was part of the problem, that there was no value, there was nothing interesting, there was nothing keeping you there. Not even the host will keep you there. So why would anybody waste any more time to watch it? But it's always important to remember that context matters. What does this actually mean? Is 383 bad for a streaming giant that releases thousands of programs a year, it feels like? So I did some research. It's clear that neither of those shows, Polo or With Love Meghan, they're two big projects within the last year or so. It's clear at this point that neither of them attracted meaningful viewership globally. The big question is whether or not a show is profitable if it's not in the top 300 shows. And the answer to that is not likely, at least not from a platform's perspective. While profitability isn't only about rankings exclusively, Netflix's ROI model heavily depends on global viewership and subscription impact. If a show doesn't trend in the top tier, fails to attract new subscribers, and/or lacks strong retention metrics, it's often seen as not worth further investment. So any sort of a ranking outside the top 300 is a big red flag for future renewals or big budget follow-ups, unless there's some sort of a niche long-tail success, which isn't evident in this case. It tends to be not a good sign, let's put it that way, in terms of a show being able to continue onwards. We know that Meghan's reach has shrunk since leaving the royal family massively, and that she's largely disliked. So the hope of driving a massive amount of subscriber count is really, really low. Like, it's clear, it's obvious, it would be unreasonable to expect Meghan to draw in a large number of new subscribers to the platform. There is a caveat in that, which we will get to in a moment. And then the fact that she didn't rank in the top 300 proves that there was no retention to the show. People didn't stay, they didn't stick around and watch the rest of the series. More people gave up watching it or only watched an episode or two to write their reviews. It was a one and done, just like the As Ever products. And this is the caveat, that for Meghan, because she is so disliked, but also because she has put herself out in the media so much, reporters and news outlets and YouTube, all these types of commentators and royal watchers and all of these types of people will watch her show once or buy a product once in order to review it. And then they're done with it. So the projections from initial performance of anything that she does are skewed a little bit. The same goes for Harry. Spare had initially good sales numbers and was performing pretty well, but then it dropped off the edge of a cliff. Everybody got their reviews out. The large mass of the public would rather just read reviews of the book than buy the book and listen to the whiner himself. And it became the most returned or left behind book. I don't know how they had that metric, but they said that it was like the most returned book of the year. So there is a clear pattern with Harry and Meghan, that there is that morbid curiosity, in part because of the absurd lies and whatnot that they tell, that you're sitting there wondering, and that the narcissistic delusions that they have the gall to say out loud. People watch it and are astonished and fascinated that somebody would actually say such a thing, would actually put something like that out into the world and act this way or think this way, or think that people will buy their story, that they'll believe their lies. It's kind of fascinating. And so there's a lot of curiosity around Harry and Meghan for that reason. But that is a very brief moment in time, and then it goes away. Then it's over with. There's no more novelty left there. We find out their lies and we move on, and then, their popularity plummets once again. It creates a negative ripple effect for themselves. And so with Love Meghan, for this show, for other projects that they've done, like As Ever, there is that sort of skewed performance in the very beginning that comes from the reviewers and the critics and the people who are just curious. It's not indicative of lasting success or long-term performance. So this not making it into the top 300 by quite a bit is definitely not a good sign for any sort of a generous contract offering coming out. The implications for Harry and Meghan and their Netflix relationship are primarily, first and foremost, decreased leverage for contracts and future projects in general, trying to get something sort of sold to Netflix of like, hey, this is a good idea, pushing it to Netflix, trying to get them to pick up an idea for a show or a project, but also for contracts, not just with Netflix, but with other companies, other media companies. Everything has flopped since Harry and Meghan's faux documentary, which is exactly what we all predicted. Their original content, things that they've come up with themselves rather than an interview sort of a situation, has absolutely no value. Harry and Meghan's Netflix show that they did together did perform relatively well, especially initially, but that was largely due to the fact that they were doubling down on the things that they had said in Oprah, which was juicy gossip to the casual viewer, but astonishing display worthy of dissection to anyone familiar with the story. It was crazy making, and people were very curious to see what sort of sensational claims they would make, or whether they would backtrack on the Oprah lies, and so that did well only because it was newsworthy, it was buzzy. Seeing how much they lied drew the eyeballs, and anything beyond a divorce special or interview of that sort is not likely to perform well. It's harder to justify spending money on Harry and Meghan now, which means a potential downgrade in their deal value with Netflix, who may choose to renegotiate or not renew the overall deal. The rumor is that they are in talks to extend With Love Meghan, since they already invested in it and they already went in on As Ever, and they've already filmed the season 2, which is just a part 2 to season 1. Everybody's understanding of it is that they filmed all of it at once, back to back, last summer. So these that are coming out in a couple of months, sometime in the fall, the part 2 of With Love Meghan, will be over a year old at that point, apparently. But because of that, because that's already established and whatnot, that the rumor is that Netflix is looking to go in on a limited contract where the payout and the profit that Meghan would receive, or Meghan and Harry would receive, will be directly tied to the viewership, which will make it less expensive for Netflix and minimally profitable for the Meg. So you've got to wonder whether or not Meghan would be willing to even bother with that much work at that point. But these numbers came at a really bad time for Meghan. It's just as she's working on re-signing with Netflix that these numbers came out. And there's a real risk of being deprioritized or even shelved, being quietly dropped like the book deal they had fall apart. Very, very quietly. It was not publicized. It wasn't made into a big deal, but there had initially been like a 3-book deal with them, and it just kind of went away after Spare because there was so much backlash and it didn't have that staying power. And the bench sucked, But Netflix could also demand a creative redirection or just simply take back a lot of creative control from Meghan on With Love Meghan, because right now she's trying to make it her thing where she's one of the producers and Archewell Productions is somehow part of it too, and that just feels like a way to shuffle the money around the board. But Meghan is trying to keep so much control over With Love Meghan that these types of numbers might inspire Netflix to require in the contract that they get back some of that control, some of the creative control over With Love Meghan, in order to try to boost the relevance of the show, which, again, you gotta wonder whether or not Meghan would be willing to do that. I feel like she would likely reject such an idea. She definitely seems like if it's not my way, then it's the highway type of lady. Anyway, overall for the Sussexes, this is rather tragic news. Although it's predictable, the brand perception damage that will be done by this will undeniably make it harder for them to secure top-tier partners or contracts in other media ventures because they're now seen as non-starters. This is just more evidence of that. And look, in creative spaces, business spaces, not every project is a win. Not every project is going to work or be a success. Whether it's an idea, a concept, a product, or an actual, creative project like a show or a book, anything like that. And anybody who operates within the business or creative sort of industries knows that not everything is going to hit. But Meghan and Harry's track record is abysmal. There's only been one thing that's ever made money, and that was the Harry and Meghan Netflix drama that was foolish. And once people watched it, they rejected it. It made Harry and Meghan look bad. It did so much damage to their public reputations. They looked whiny, incredibly narcissistic. It was vacuous. It was empty. It was navel-gazing. It was just dumb. It was a dumb, faux documentary, and it was full of fictitious things. It wasn't a documentary. It's irresponsible to call it that, but whatever. That's a different issue. The Bench and Spare, for example, had zero staying power, and The Bench underperformed massively. It was an embarrassment, really, and both books had negative reputations and reviews. Archetypes and Confessions of a Sucky Business Lady flopped in ratings, drew negative reviews from critics, and fizzled out rather quickly. The Spotify contract even imploded gloriously, complete with grifter comments from frustrated executives who said The Meg isn't a voice talent to be had. Disney had the one-off narration from The Meg on the Elephants documentary, and it did not perform well. It was not an impressive showing. She was really boring to listen to, and they cut ties with Meghan and Harry after that. Netflix tried clinging on to milk the Sussexes for all they're worth after Harry and Meghan's Netflix thingy went okay. But even that, which got those sensationalist views and that morbid curiosity and the critics and the commentators and everybody was watching it, it still had bad ratings, bad reviews, bad response from the public. Its reception was poor because it was boring, whiny, lame, and embarrassing to watch. And nothing since then has performed at all. That's the one thing. Everything else they've tried has sucked. Their content creation careers are a disappointment, to put it nicely, and a train wreck, to be perfectly honest. Netflix reportedly considers something a success if it hits 100 million hours watched within 28 days. Meghan's got to 12.6 million hours watched in its first week, but then it dropped off a cliff, and total views, not hours, just number of views, is only at 5.3 million in its first few months. That's incredibly bad performance. You have like an 80 million hour gap between what Netflix considers a benchmark success and how Meghan's show performed. On the surface, it would seem counterintuitive that Netflix would try to keep Meghan Markle or Prince Harry under contract after a weak performing series like With Love Meghan on the heels of an abysmal showing with Polo. But there are a few strategic reasons why they may choose to do so, at least for the time being. One is to simply stay under contract while releasing what has already been filmed and invested in. If part 2 of With Love Meghan was already in post-production or filming when these results came in, which we know it was probably about wrapped in terms of post-production and editing, they may release it anyway just to recoup some of the sunk costs and extend the contract long enough that it sort of umbrellas over that release. There's also rumor of Harry's Diana documentary, which we all hope he doesn't do for William's sake. And just in general, it's not a wanted thing, especially not from Harry. He needs to move away from his mother being his entire identity. But it could be a reason to keep the Sussexes under a more limited, less profitable contract if that's in the pipeline, as the name recognition and global press attention would spin them into at least some profit margin, likely. Netflix may also actually be letting the deal quietly lapse or are biding their time to see if the metrics change over the rest of this year. So as I was editing this video, news came out, it was leaked that Harry and Meghan's Netflix deal is officially ending. They've decided to just kind of quietly let it end so that they can keep the relationship amicable at least, and perhaps have a first look sort of a contract, meaning that if anything major happens, they will come to Netflix first if they want to do any other interviews or any other sort of big reveals of something like that. They'll offer it to Netflix before they offer it to anyone else. Besides that, the relationship is over, with Netflix bosses having no appetite for anything new from the couple because of that poor performance. So it is as we had sort of predicted, and I think as a lot of people had hoped, that the deal will not continue just because their content is so bland and boring that nobody wants it. So why are they still having these types of contracts go? But with such little return from a business perspective, it's nearly impossible to hang on to a situation like this if it's not turning profits, even if there is one person, namely Ted, apparently, on your side. Ultimately, it's still a business decision at the end of the day. But these very insiders who revealed that the deal is dead and not going to be renewed, and that it's going to be just sort of quietly fizzled out and let the contract lapse, they also claimed that Meghan Markle was holding out with hopes that her rankings, which just were released, which we had been discussing, would give her the leverage needed to, at the very least, hang on to With Love Meghan, especially since she's tied as ever's business structure and potential so tightly to With Love Meghan. She has said that they exist in the same universe, but they are not the same. But in reality, she has tied them together in every way possible. And Netflix had initial talks with her that they were open to considering a limited deal with zero upfront funds for production and only paying out in alignment with viewership numbers, as we had previously discussed in today's video. But they were all waiting to see where it ranked in these numbers. And these numbers killed the deal, essentially. It reduced any potential opportunity, and I think a lot of it may have to do with the fact that Harry's content and their other content, like Live to Lead, for example, ranked so incredibly low. There was absolutely zero return on those investments. Zero. There's no way to get a return on something that ranks in the 3,000s of not even getting 500,000 views is so pitiful on a streamer like Netflix. So that really, really drove it home. That combined with Love Meghan being such a costly production for them, Meghan having 80 crew and all these extra things and being so difficult to work with, it was very, very expensive for Netflix to do As Ever and With Love Meghan with Meghan. And so for them, the return was just absolutely not there, and neither show ranking in the top 300. Harry's show ranking so incredibly, embarrassingly low. It killed any opportunity for hanging on to that deal. The low performance of With Love Meghan on the rankings, combined with her obvious shortcomings, Netflix has now decided to let the deal die and quietly allow the contract to lapse, not renewing it for anything at all. Probably thankful for a way out with their Sussex relationship, since they're so very challenging to work with and everything just wasn't going well. But there is rumor that they did sign or agree to a first look deal so that they keep the door open. And because of that, there probably won't be any sort of major news about this or statements about it, or even how we heard from Bill Simmons after the Spotify partnership ended. We had those comments from Bill Simmons that they were grifters, and he talked a lot of shit about them, basically. We won't have anything like that coming out of Team Netflix because they do want to keep that first look rights alive with Harry and Meghan. So they do want to keep it amicable, but they are also ending it. So, I mean, smart business decision, pretty predictable, but big news at the end of the day. This is bad for Harry and Meghan. This is the end of the road when it comes to major mainstream deals. Like you saw what happened with Spotify ending. Meghan tried to go over to Lemonada. Nobody really listens to Lemonada. It's not a thing that's going to spin profit. A passion project, fine. And maybe that can eventually become profitable for some celebrities, likable sorts of people. But this is a major disappointment for Harry and Meghan and does not bode well for their Archewell production efforts. But what do you think will come of their deal? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope you have a happy day ahead. I will see you next time. Bye.